Hey there, geeks and geekettes. I'm the Bearded Geek, and this is my review of It Chapter 2. So, this is my spoiler-free review for It Chapter 2. If you've seen the first It, you get much of the same. If you haven't seen it, don't pay much attention to what the critics have said. From my opinion anyway, this film was superior to the first. The critics have sort of labelled this film more of the same but not quite as good, and to me, I think they're wrong. So obviously, It Chapter 2 released on the 6th of September. I went to go and watch it on release day. The cinema was jam-packed, and the reactions from people sitting there watching it said everything I need to know about the film. So obviously it's the sequel to the 2017 film, It. Both of these and the original sort of TV miniseries are both based on Stephen King's 1986 novel of the same name. This film is directed by Andy Muschietti and written by Gary Doberman, same crew as It Chapter 1. So Chapter 2 is set in 2016, which is 27 years after the events depicted in It Chapter 1. So obviously the Losers Club are now adults, and the adults are played by Jessica Chastain, James McAvoy, Bill Hader, Asaya Mustafa, Jay Ryan, James Ranson and Andy Bean. If you think you're going to go and watch this film and miss the child stars of the original, then don't worry, because Hayden Martell, Sophia Lillis, Finn Wolfhard, Chosen Jacobs, Jeremy Ray Taylor, Jack Dylan Grazer and Wyatt Oleff all reprised their roles as the younger losers, and of course Bill Skarsgård returns as Pennywise the Dancing Clown. And if anything, they've completely let Bill Skarsgård run loose in this movie. He is absolutely terrifying in it, it's got to be said. So you can tell the budget had been increased because of the success of It Chapter 1, and it really does show in some of the pieces in this movie. Everything about it just looks better, it sounds better, and Skarsgård, he's let loose. It really does work. He is so sinister and menacing in this. There are areas where the CGI with Pennywise is a little bit over the top when you know what Bill Skarsgård can do facially without sort of the digital effects. The things with his eyes, he does that himself. He curves his bottom lip into a point and drools. That's all him. That's not added to the film. So some of it was a little bit too much for the CGI, but you know, they got the budget, they may as well go for it. Initially, I was a little worried about the ending of this film because I've read the book, and the end of the book is absolutely insane. It is off the wall crazy. I think Stephen King might have been in a heyday of narcotics when he finished the book. So I was kind of concerned because the original TV movie didn't finish in the same manner as the book, because they could never back then have gotten away with it. They'd never have finished it the same way with the special effects and sort of limitations back in the 90s. Luckily now we've got the means to do something like that. So think of the Doctor Strange special effects, and that could work, or could have worked for the end of this film. They didn't do it. They hinted at it. They used enough of it to not confuse the story, not to make it complete insanity. And for me, it really did work for it. It worked really well. Obviously, Bill Skarsgård as It was phenomenal. He was... I would say he stole the show, but the movie is called It. It revolves around Pennywise. Pennywise? Now I can't even say normal names. But he was outshone by one of the adult actors who, a guy called Bill Hader, who I've only ever seen doing sort of Saturday Night Live comedy skits, and I thought you could get the comedy aspect nailed, but I wasn't so sure if he could play the sort of the deeper emotional sort of element of an adult Richie. And he completely blew me away with his acting. He has sort of a major emotional scene in the movie, and he plays it brilliant. You actually forget that this is a guy that really is a comedian. He does it so well. James McAvoy is incredible. Chastain is incredible. Isaiah Mustafa, wow. I don't think I've seen him in anything before, but the part he plays, it's really, really good. He shows this bordering on because he's the guy that stayed behind in Derry. He's the guy bordering on insanity because he remembers everything. And I wouldn't say that the adults have out-acted the younger counterparts, but they were every bit as good, and that's something that worried me, that maybe the adults wouldn't be able to portray the film or portray the roles as well as the original sort of child parts. But they nailed it. You could see these children turning into these adults within 27 years. It was believable. I think everyone got the time to shine. There was enough sort of small segments of these guys off on their own, showing their introduction back into the story, and then them on their own in Maine dealing with the past, and it really did work. I've heard people say that the plot is convoluted. Well, go and read the book and then tell me that this was convoluted. They found some sort of happy medium. They found some middle ground. They've gone with it. It's fantastic enough to still pass as King's initial sort of run. And I can't say enough good about this film. I mean, is it the best film I've ever seen? Well, no, but it's one of the best horror films I've seen. It's definitely, to me, on the same level, if not better, than the first It film. I'm not going to give spoilers away. There's so much I could say, but it would give the plot of the film away, because this plot is so different to the book in some respects that you can go in after reading the book and you will not know what is going to happen. Sort of these little plot threads, you won't know what's going to happen through them. The basic premise is that Mike Hanlon, the original, one of the only original member to have stayed in Derry, realizes that Pennywise the Dancing Clown has come back 27 years later. He calls the Losers Club back in, and obviously they're all adults now. Bill is a successful screenwriter. Ben has lost weight, and he's now this sort of really successful buff architect. Richie Tozier is a stand-up comedian, a rather successful stand-up comedian. Eddie Kazbrak is a risk assessor, which really fits with his personality from when he was a child. And Beverly, it doesn't say what she does really, but she lives in a big house with her husband, and there's massive sort of art prints of the two of them. So I'm guessing they were an actor and actress sort of couple, or they were involved in film. It doesn't really say too much. Then the group all get together in Derry. And through these stories, you see that their lives are not quite as successful as you would think. There's sort of a darkness to it. And they all go back to Derry. They meet up with Mike Hanlon. And something from the original It movie that it probably scared me as a kid was the Chinese restaurant scene. That was probably the only bit of the adult story in the original It TV movie that was any good. This takes that up again. It's, if you're squeamish, it's It's quite intense, and that's sort of the thing with the film. It is really intense. So without giving much away, there's a cameo you want to keep your eye out for. It is really funny. This film, it was as much a comedy as it was a horror, but it works. It was like a roller coaster of emotion, because the laughs landed and you're proper sort of up here with laughter, and then suddenly you've just seen something quite terrifying, and you're down here. Mrs. Geek wasn't well enough to go to the cinema with me on Friday night, so I took our stepdaughter, or my stepdaughter, and as we were going through the film, she was sort of sloping down further and further through a chair. She pulled her hood up, and the hood was coming further and further. And at one point, she was watching the movie through sort of one eye, and she jumped, she screamed, and she wasn't the only one. There were people jumping and screaming all over the cinema. The whole cinema was erupting in laughter when they were supposed to. Pennywise, much like the story, was as funny as he was evil and sinister. There were some really dark story threads about just how bad a place Derry is in this, before Pennywise sort of shows himself for, 27 years later. I would never go there if it really existed. And this was such a well-rounded movie to me. Granted, some of the CGI didn't quite land, but on the most part, this film was beautiful to look at. The emotional investment was very real. At times, I'm quite desensitized to horror films. I can see jump scares coming a mile off and they don't get me. This film got me 3 times. There were 3 jump scares that got me. And you could say, oh, jump scares for jump scares reason. Well, Pennywise feeds off fear, so he would put his version of a jump scare on these adults because they're going to be harder to scare. And he goes all out. If I find another negative, they de-aged, I think they de-aged the children, because obviously 2 years later, when you're that young, you change quite a bit. And there's something off with some of their faces. Beverly, or the young actress that plays Beverly, she doesn't look much different. The biggest standout problem is with young Richie. They've de-aged him because he looks a lot different now. He's taller, he's slimmer, and because he wears these big thick glasses, the CGI that they used to de-age him, it couldn't get his eyes right. There was just something off every time I looked at him. But the CGI aside, obviously Richie, the character Richie as a child and an adult, he was spot on. He stole every scene he was in the original as the child, as the adult. He does the exact same thing. And you laugh every time the guy is on screen, even when he's terrified, and you laugh because his coping mechanism is humour. And he's still got the potty mouth, which is it's really cool. So if I was going to give It Chapter 2 a mark out of 10, an 8.5, 8.5, it's nowhere near as boring or bland and convoluted as the critics will have you believe. To me, I mean, it's only my personal opinion because other people view things differently. This film, for me, was better than the original. If not better, as good, every bit as good. Skarsgård is totally let loose. The budget, you can tell the budget has increased dramatically, and it really does work. There are other characters aside from Pennywise in this movie who are truly evil, and everything just works so well. Obviously the guys coming back, that playing against the sort of younger selves, having the younger kids in the movie with the adults at certain points could have sort of reminded you of what the first film was like and made you miss the original characters, and that didn't happen because the adult versions were so well done. You could believe these kids turn into these adults, and it'll work. It does work. So yeah, easy 8.5 out of 10. I thoroughly enjoyed this film. It's a shame there's not going to be another continuation, because if Pennywise did come back in another 27 years, these guys would be too old to take him on. You can't have sort of 60-year-old people fighting a demonic, interdimensional clown shapeshifter. I've heard talk that there's a Pennywise prequel being done with Skarsgård. It could be good, but I don't know if a film solely based around Pennywise will work. The Losers Club really do make these films. Apart from the TV movie, the child part of it was great. The adult part was not so good. Maybe it was the actors. It was a TV movie, low budget. Obviously, Tim Curry was epic as Pennywise. I wouldn't say I preferred Tim Curry. I think Tim Curry and Bill Skarsgård play very different versions of the same character, and they are both equally as good. So there was my review of Chapter 2. If you go to an Odeon, you can pick one of these up, which is going to go up on my ceiling / slopey wall. This is going to go up. Grab one of these for free on your way out. So that's kind of cool. I've got a couple of Marvel things like this. I do want to fill my wall space. So guys, please go and check out It Chapter 2. And check it out with your own mind, not what you've read online, not what the critics are telling you, because if you believe the critics, this film is boring and it's nowhere near as good as the original. And I personally think the critics got this completely wrong. I think the cast nailed it, the director nailed it. So guys, that was my review for It Chapter 2. 8.5, go and see it. Ignore the critics. It's far better than they will have you believe. I really enjoyed it. If Skarsgård hadn't been in a horror film with heavy CGI, he would be up for some form of award somewhere. Unfortunately, horror gets overlooked. But yeah, please go check it out. I've been the Bearded Geek. That's been my review of It Chapter 2. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you guys soon. Goodbye.